Hi, you guys. Again, my name is Zarius Walker, and this is another live stream of Alabama Care. And today we're going to be talking about derogatory rhetoric or terms that people with disability place upon themselves. Um, I have a story to go along with this podcast today. Uh, Funny story. My friend that I mentioned in my last podcast, he was at work and he met this older guy who had a disability. This guy was in a wheelchair, not sure exactly what his disability was. I think he was like a vet. And he referred to himself as handicapped. He also referred in the midst of their conversation, he also referred to himself as handicapped or crippled and things of that nature. And so my friend who I've been knowing for a long time, he took it upon himself to correct him on these terms and explain to him that those are not the correct terms that you should be associating yourself with. Um, so he gave him the history of some of the terms that he was using, like handicap. I don't know if you guys know this, but handicap is really an insult because back in, I think it was World War II, when the soldiers came home, they had they wasn't being treated like they should have been treated, considering that they had fought for our country. So they came home with canes. A lot of people came home with wheelchairs. A lot of people came home with missing limbs, and they couldn't find jobs. People didn't want to hire them. Um, and because people didn't want to hire them, they suffered a lot, especially like, their home life. They couldn't fund themselves. They couldn't live. So what they would do is they would take a cap, and they would take their cap, the army cap or whatever unit they was in, and they would stand on the corner of convenience stores, gas stations, and they would put that cap out in front of them and beg for money. And people would drop change, couple dollars here and there, and put it in the cap for them. And that's where the term handicap comes from. And I don't know about you, but me personally, sorry you guys, my phone just dropped. I don't know about you, but me personally, I don't beg for anything. I work for everything I got, everything I have, and everything that I have obtained. I work for it. So for me, I get offended when someone refers to me as handicapped, let alone someone who has a disability referring to themselves as handicapped. It's just not a good feeling. It's funny because even as a child, even though I didn't know the backstory behind the word, it just never sat right with my spirit. It always felt like something was wrong with that word, and it wasn't until later on that I found out the reason. And to segue into my next topic about these derogatory terms, a lot of older generations still use these terms to this day, and it's evident because I see it every day when I go to work. Because a lot of people still refer to this people with disability as these same terms, like handicapped, crippled, or deaf, or um, even some people still use the term. Is not widely used today as much, but some people still use the R word, um, which also is an insult. And people may associated with people with disabilities, especially the older generation, because that's all they knew. That's all they knew to call a person with a disability was handicap, or or dumb, or my. It's funny because I asked my dad what were some of the terms that were used, and he said, "Ain't quite." And so I was like, "What?" So I was like, "What's ain't quite?" And he said, "Well, if you had a extremity that was balled up, or you was missing a limb, or you walked funny, they used to say, well, he ain't quite got it. It was like he ain't quite got it, or he ain't quite got it because he's missing a limb. So they would just call him ain't quite." Very harsh. But you can't really blame them, because uh ignorance is bliss sometimes. Um, but the best thing that we could do is try to educate them. And for some people, it's kind of hard to educate someone if they've gotten accustomed to doing that over the years. It's like trying to quit smoking and you've been smoking for 10 years. It's kind of hard to just pick up a new habit, or kind of hard to pick up something in place of that when you're so used to when you're so used to doing it consistently on an everyday basis. Um, for me, it hurts me to hear people with disabilities in general refer to themselves as handicapped or crippled, because it's such a bad stigma that comes along with those terms. It's such a bad outlook, because it makes you feel, I know me personally, it makes me feel less than what I am when I'm referred by these terms. It's a shock. It's a shock to my pride and my self-esteem. And I raised the question. I raised the question to some people when I was talking about this previous conversation with friends. Is it passed down? Is it like a generational thing, or is it self-taught? Um, Personally, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's passed down because if nobody teaches you different, you're gonna go with what you know. So I think it's passed down, but I also think it's self-taught, because it's so easy to call somebody handicapped. Because even as kids, I grew up in the 90s. So even in the 90s, that word was still commonly used to describe a person with a disability. So I think it's a little bit passed down. I think it's generational. I think that generation.
You muted, Zarius.
Passed down is self-taught as well. Like I said, um, it but it hurts. It hurts because people don't really think nothing of it, but it can be damaging to your self-esteem, because it puts a negative connotation on your disability. And being a person with a disability is already hard enough as it is. It's already a bunch of trials and tribulations that we have to go through on a day-to-day basis. So I try to look for the silver lining in being a person with a disability most days. Well, I ain't gonna say most days, all the time. I try to look for the silver lining, or I try to turn lemons into lemonade type of thing, because that's the way that I keep going. So when I hear older generations, or when I hear people refer to other people on the street, they'll say, "Oh, he's crippled," or "he's handicapped," or "he's deaf," or "dumb." People even used to use the word "dumb" as a derogatory term for people with disabilities. That's where that term came from. Um, so when I hear older people talk like that, it makes me, I ain't gonna lie, it makes me want to correct them. Not saying that I'm supposed to be this big spokesperson for people with disability, but if if I have the knowledge, it's wasted if I don't share it, because most of the time people just don't know. Like the conversation that my friend had with this older gentleman, once he educated him on the use of the term, he was like, "Wow, I'm no longer gonna refer to myself as that, because I didn't know that was all I knew to call myself, being a person with a disability." And it's a if that one person is like that, I'm almost willing to bet it's a bunch of older people, and probably even some younger people, that still refer to themselves like that to this day. And I think it's time we as a community, whether it be disabled or not non-dis or a person without a disability, I think it's time for us to come together and kind of try to put a hold on those words, and come up with new words or new ways to address people with disability. Because I'm gonna be honest, everybody doesn't have the same tolerance that I have for being called those words. A lot of people get offended for being called those words. Me in particular, that I know how to channel my anger and frustration into something that's into a teaching moment, rather than it being into a moment where I get offended and I lash out. Uh, there's a lot of self-esteem issues that can come with that word. Like, you can, as I stated before, you can it can cause you to look at your disability in a negative connotation, a negative light. It can cause you to not feel confident within yourself. Because I don't know about you, but when I get called handicapped, it just makes me feel like I'm lesser than everybody else. It makes me feel like I have something wrong with me. It makes me feel like my disability is looked at as kind of like kind of like a disease, in a sense. It just makes me feel like I'm begging. It makes me feel like I'm lower. Um, it it also can have other effects socially. It can cause you to be more closed off in a group setting, because you may not feel like you're worthy because you've been calling yourself handicapped so long. And most of the time, we will, let's be honest here, most of the time we watch TV, they use that term. And most of the time when they use that term, they pick the most, they pick the most, how can I put this? They put the most severe case that they could possibly think of and put it on TV. And they'll say, "Oh, and they'll have somebody else say, "Oh, he's handicapped." And due to that, that's what people usually associate that term with. So when we're called that, there's that negative connotation, not only from society, but from a television standpoint. Um, there's also there's also a lot of things that come with that come with these terms, like you can it can affect not just your personal life or your self-esteem life. It can affect your workplace, because again, workplaces still use those terms. I done been on job interviews and they still use those terms. I done been sitting at the door and clearly I have a Walmart vest on and people still use those terms to describe me, even though I'm not begging for money. And even though I work to sustain myself and pay my own bills, people still use that term to describe me as a person. And I'm not my disability. I just have a disability. There's a difference. Um, this is something that the older generation, I'm not going to say that it's their fault. I'm not going to say that they should be reprimanded. I'm just going to say that if you see someone that's using these terms or using this rhetoric, it's a teachable moment, because my dad or somebody else who's old as my dad's in his 50s, almost 60. Um, it I'm not gonna say that it's their fault. I'm just gonna say it's a teachable moment, because he didn't know. He didn't know before me and my mom came. Me and my mom came in his life. It's a lot of things that my dad found out after I came in his life, um, about the rhetoric and the correct way to address a person with a disability. And even my mom, like she she was I'm not gonna sit here and say my mom was always knowledgeable, but she's been learning over the years as well, certain things that you shouldn't and should not say when it comes to people with disability. And it's funny because my mom is like one of my biggest advocates when it comes to that type of stuff. Like she don't like for people to call me that. She will get very offended. She will she a lot of times she will step up before I will. Even my friends, like I've been in the mall or in certain settings, and somebody will refer to me as, oh, I'm talking about the dude, the crippled dude in the wheelchair. And my friends will be like, man, what you call him? And they get confrontational. But the thing is, that's not a time, that's while I appreciate the defense, that's not a time to be confrontational. That's a teaching moment, because you reach one, teach one. So if I'm teaching, if I'm telling this older guy or this guy that's closer to my age peer the correct terms, he's gonna turn around and teach somebody else who's gonna teach somebody else who's gonna teach somebody else who's gonna teach somebody else. And it's a it's a cycle, because at the end of the day, people with disability deserve to be respected. Even though even though we do things even though we do things different, we may walk, we may talk, we may move different, we're still people. We may have to have modified things, we may have to have assistance, but we're still people, and we still deserve the same respect that every other human being deserves, regardless of if we have a wheelchair, a walker, or crutches, or or I don't know the name. I forgot the name of this chair, but it's like the 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 sucking sucking puff wheelchair where they can't really use their head. And regardless of whatever form of modifications we have to assist us, or adaptive assistance technology that we have to assist us in our everyday lives, we're still people. Um, I can't tell you that it's gonna go away overnight. This is a fight that's been people with disability have been fighting for a long time. There's even books and pamphlets that you can get that gives you the correct terms. You can go on YouTube. I mean, not YouTube. You can go on Google, and Google has a whole list of the correct terms to call each person with a disability for every category. It just takes a little self-awareness and a little study to change it. It's a habit. It only takes 30 days to change a habit, human wise, technically. So if we can get into the practice of taking those words and these terms and substituting them with something else, I think the conversation between a person with a disability and a person without a disability will go a whole lot further and a whole lot smoother. Uh, so I just had to say that, and I had to make this my topic because it bo- it really bothers me, as it should, and it should bother another person with a disability, because a lot of people don't think nothing of it. They just roll with the punches. But you can't you can't just roll with the punches with everything. Some stuff you gotta have self-worth and self-pride in. And I don't know about you, but my whole life, I've been a person with a disability. And truth be told, I take pride in being a person with a disability, because there's without me having a disability, to be honest, I don't think I would be the same person. I don't think I would be as self-aware. I don't think I would be as conscious, because having a disability has enabled me to slow down, and it's enabled me to think more than the average person, because we're constantly people are constantly on the go. A lot of people don't take the time to think. And with me being a person with a disability, it allows me to do that. So I take pride in it. Um, I don't always like it. I'm gonna be honest. I don't always like it, but I do take pride in it. So when it comes to the terminologies, like instead of saying handicap, or instead of saying crippled, handicap, disabled, crippled, physically impaired, uh, deaf, hearing impaired, um, it's blind, visually impaired, or a person who is visually impaired, or a person who is hearing impaired. It's called people first language, which means you put the person before the disability. Um, it's very simple. It's gonna take some getting used to, especially for the older generation, because they've been conditioned and taught that that is the only thing that we should be called. That's the only thing that seems right to them. And you're gonna have some that's gonna, if you go out today or you go out another day, and there's people that you try to tell this to, and they don't want to listen, you're gonna have some that be reluctant, because they're stuck in their ways. I'm gonna be honest. They're older. They live their life some older people are stuck in their ways. You're not gonna be able to tell them what they should and shouldn't say. But don't get discouraged. Say it in a way to where say it in a way to where it's not criticizing them, but it's just letting them know, hey, these are the correct ways to address a person with disability. These are the correct ways, because it can be offensive, it can hurt their feelings, it can make them feel less than it, and just let them know. And if they heed to it, that's great. But if they don't, move on to the next person, because just because once just because you get one that's unreceptive doesn't mean that they're all going to be unreceptive. So it I guarantee you it'll make its way back to you, and you'll see the change, because you might excuse me, you might run into that same person and they might tell you that they ran into somebody who was using that term and they corrected them. And then it just goes down into a trickle effect. Uh one thing I want to tell you too is this is very important. This is really important about the correct terminology, because we people with disability are not going anywhere, especially in Alabama, when when most of our demographic consists of people with disability. A lot of people don't know that, but most of the demographic in Alabama consists of people with disability: vets, retirees, people who got injured on the job, people who who got injured in the army. Like, it's just we're not going anywhere. So I think for me personally, I think it's time for us to make a change in the terminology that we use. Um, because you wouldn't want somebody to call you a derogatory term and tell you that that's all they knew. It's like, and I know this is going to be a touchy subject what I'm about to say, but it's like calling somebody the N word who doesn't like to be referred to as the N word, or calling another race a derogatory term. It, it doesn't feel so good. It doesn't feel so good when you don't when you deem that word unacceptable. It's the same thing when it comes to a person with a disability. We feel that same disgust when we're being called handicapped or crippled or retarded or crazy or a dummy. Or I think my friend said that his dad said that they used to call him a John Doe, and that's like a person with no name. So that's even more of an insult. So, we feel that same disgrace. And I think it goes back to the cardinal rule that you learn. You treat and address people how you want to be treated and addressed. And I'm not saying that you gotta walk around when you meet a person with a disability, that you gotta walk around on tiptoes and on eggshells, but just keep in mind that how you address how would just keep in mind how you would want to be addressed. And even if you don't know how to address that person, it's okay to ask. It's the only bad question is the question that's not asked. Um, because and this segue into a little bit, but people want to ask me all the time, like, what's your disability? But they be scared to ask me what's my disability, or they be scared to ask me, you know, how do I do certain things? Like, one person asked me how do I, like a kid asked me, and it was like, how you put your clothes on? They don't know. So I just simply explained to them, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like you do. Um, and that just goes back to me saying it's okay to ask. It's okay to put yourself out there, because if you don't ask, you're not gonna know. It's okay to ask. It's okay for you to walk up to Johnny or Susan and be like, what do you prefer to be called? Do you prefer to? And you're gonna have some people that say they prefer to be called handicapped. You're gonna have that. I'm not gonna take that away from you. I'm not saying that you should be all up in arms when you hear somebody say that, because everybody have a preference. I'm just saying that if you can, try to teach them a different way. Try to teach them a less derogatory way. Try to teach them a way that's less insulting to the ear. Um, because it only takes again, it only takes one person, because that and I say one person because that one person could teach somebody else, who could teach somebody else, who could teach somebody else, who could teach somebody else. So it only takes one person. Um, is there any um ways that you can keep in mind when you're talking to people with disability, like keep those words in mind? I just make it an everyday habit. Um, I constantly try to, even when I'm having casual conversations, I don't let people call me that in casual conversation, even if they just joking. I don't let people joke like that. I've had people that joke like that, and I corrected them. I don't. My friends don't even call me those words in casual conversations. And if we're around somebody who uses those terms, my friends, a lot of time, they're the first person to say something before I will. So again, you reach one, teach one. Um, is really not that hard. It just takes a little practice, just like with everything else. And before you know it, you'll be saying people with disabilities quicker than you would say anything else. And if somebody else says it to you, if somebody else uses those terms to you, you'll be like, hold up, that doesn't sit right with me, or that doesn't make me feel good, because I got a friend that has a person with disability. And it's funny because when I did the speaking engagement, um, October the 19th, this is how I got the podcast. But when I did the speaking engagement, I was in the car with that friend, and he was on the phone with one of his friends, and they was having a conversation about a person with a disability. And he was like, man, they was joking, but he was like, man, I'm not retarded. And I was like, and my friend was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, and I was like, man, I said, I'm not that word. I'm not the R word either. And he was like, oh, I didn't know he was in the car with you. And he was like, yeah, bro, you can't, you got to find a better way. He said, he was like, it's called people with disabilities. It's not called the R word, or it's not called uh crippled or anything like that, so it's just, and he was real apologetic, and he was real understanding, like he genuinely didn't know. So, and he's of my age group, so it just to let you know, it's not just older people, it's a people thing in general, no matter what your age is. It's just a, because people don't think about it, because a lot of people feel like, I'm gonna be honest, a lot of people, out of sight, out of mind. If it's not them, they don't think about it because it's not them. It doesn't become real until it's somebody that's close to them, or it's them. Just being honest. So I just think that that's something that we as people could work on, especially people with disabilities, because how can you have confidence in yourself when you're calling yourself a beggar? It's just plain and simple. How can you have confidence in yourself when you're downgrading your? How can you expect somebody else to respect you when you don't even respect yourself enough to refer to yourself as the appropriate term? I I'm a firm believer in having self-respect. I'm a firm believer in having dignity. I'm a firm believer in having pride in myself, and I just refuse to see it any other way. Because at the same time, it's a thing that I feel like personally has to be rectified. I honestly feel like the word handicap shouldn't even be. I don't know if it still is, but I don't feel like the word handicap should even be in the dictionary at this point. Um, I feel like they should take it out. I feel like they should take it out because of the negative connotation that's associated with it. But I also understand that people don't understand the meaning of the word. People just heard somebody say it and said, "Oh, that's what they call that." Well, okay. Well, when I see somebody and I want to talk to them, or I want to let somebody know that this is what's going on, that's what I'm gonna use. But a lot of people don't know that these terms are old and outdated, and these terms hurt people. These terms make people feel bad about themselves, and especially with social media being the way it is, and how people are killing themselves for being called different things. You don't know how a certain terminology may trigger a person, or what that may lead to, or how that may make them feel later on down in life. Because I'm gonna be honest, when I have kids, I'm not gonna allow my kids to say none of these words. Like, my kids are gonna go and they're gonna know that's incorrect. And when they see somebody using that word, they're gonna say, "Hey, my dad has a disability. This is the correct way to address them." It starts it starts with you. It starts with you. It starts with and it also starts with a dialogue. Starts with a conversation. Because again, a lot of people aren't aware. A lot of people don't have they don't have someone to tell them, hey, this is not the correct way. This is how you should address he or she. Uh, this is how you should handle this is how you should handle this conversation. And I just feel like, it only takes a little bit. It only takes a little bit of time just to stop and realize, but stop and realize, hey, maybe I should address them in another way. Cause me personally, when I was younger, when I was like 16, and I was full of like hormones and and I had a chip on my shoulder. If you would have called me handicapped back then, you would have met a totally different Zarius. It was something that I didn't tolerate. Period. Um, I just I just I just want to share that, that part of it, because it's something that I feel like needs to be changed. And I know it's gonna take some time. I know it's probably gonna take more than just my podcast. It's probably gonna take more than just me, but I know it's gonna take some time because people really don't think about it. And you know, I'm gonna be honest, it's human nature. If it's not directly associated with people with a certain people, a lot of the time they don't really care. But I'm gonna be honest, like it still doesn't take away the fact that it bothers people. It bothers people. It makes people feel bad. And we are having a person with having a disability already hurts because there's a lot of things that come with having a disability. So it already hurts. So we don't want to be reminded of how bad it hurts by being called something that makes us feel less than what we're worth. Excuse me, ironic. That makes us feel less than what we're worth. Um, I any questions?
No questions, Zarius.
Okay. Um, also, I feel I wanna drop this little testimonial in. I was I think I was in like I went to a camp. This how I found out about the word handicap and everything. Cause at first I didn't know. I like I said before, I didn't know. I went to a youth leadership forum in Troy that they hold every summer, and they gave us they told us the history of ADA. Um, and for those who don't know, that's the Americans with Disability Act, and they gave us the history of ADA and where handicap came from, and it was a plethora of other words that were mentioned in 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 my time there, and I was like, man, that's messed up, like, because it's like with those words, you automatically put us in a box. You automatically make us feel less than what we are. You automatically tell us, oh, you ain't you're not worth very much to society. Only thing you're capable of doing is asking for a handout. That's basically what that is. And that's a harsh that's harsh. That's harsh. And I also I even still deal with it to this day. Like it's people it was a customer that came to my job who who tried to hand me $1 and he said, "You handicapped, right?" And I said, "No, I'm disabled." And he said, "No, you handicapped, right?" And he tried to hand me $1, even though I was on the clock and I was working for my dollar. He was like, "No, you handicapped, take the $1." And I said, "I don't want your dollar." And he said, "No, but you're handicapped." I said, "No, I'm disabled and I don't want your $1." I said, "I don't know if you know it or not, but I'm working. I work for my dollar. I don't I don't need nobody to give me $1. I'd rather get out there and work." So it's stuff like that and he was an older guy, which speaks back on to my topic. You know, he was an older guy, so that that just ruined my whole mood. Like I didn't even want to be at work no more. Like it was just that's a hurtful feeling. to be thought of as less than, because essentially that's what that word is. It's a way of somebody calling you less than because you walk a little different, or you may have a uh short limb, or you may have a short hand, or a short hand. You may have a nub for a hand, or you may be missing a limb or something like that. It's a way of making people feel less than, and a lot of times it's unintentional, but a lot of times it's intentional. And I'm going to tell you what to do when it's intentional also, because I've been in situations where people have intentionally called me that. And I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm just this perfect little person that always handles it the right way, because I've had my trial and error situations with being called these terms. But as I gotten older, I've learned how to navigate it. Um, Specifically, the guy who called me handicapped and tried to give me $1. Uh, I just laughed it off. And I tried to correct him, you know. And I've even had someone tell me my disability was demonic, and said that I need to pray so that God will get rid of my disability. But here's the thing: God doesn't make mistakes. I was put here. I was put here like that for a reason, and I was put here, and I know I was put here to be an example for somebody else. So I try not to let that stuff get to me. I try to when I meet older people that say things like that, because she was older too. She even tried to use the Bible as a reference when I told her that that was offensive, and she was like, "Oh well, in the Bible they," and I was like, "Where in the Bible? If somebody could show me in the Bible where it says my disability, me having a disability is demonic, then I'll change my tune." But it just come from ignorance. It comes from them not knowing. It comes from you not being in the same place that that person is. It comes from you not walking in their shoes. So you have no reason to have any empathy for that person with disability. So a lot of people feel like they could say that and it's okay. It's I'm here to tell you firsthand, it's not okay. It's not okay, because at the end of the day, CP or no CP, disability or no disability, I still have feelings just like a regular human being. I am a regular human being. I just so happen to have a disability. And I think as soon as people get that in their head, that even though that person has a disability, they're still a regular human being who have feelings, who have emotions, who have thoughts. I think that's when the dialect will start to change. I think that's when the terminologies will start to change, and I think that's when you know they'll start to fade themselves out. Um, and some are starting to fade out now in 2022, and I think it's gonna progress as the years go by. I, the way I see it going, I feel like within the next probably 5 to 10 years, they might not even use the word handicap anymore. They might come up with something else. Um, that's my hope. That's my personal hope. Um, crippled as well. Like crippled is just that's for me, that's right up there with the R word. It 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 don't sit right. It um like it just it makes me feel disgusted. It just don't sit right with my spirit. It don't make me feel like it makes me feel like I can't do anything when I'm referred to as that. Even though I know that's not true, but these words have these what people gotta understand is these words have stigmas that's attached to them. And when you call somebody these words, that stigma comes to that stigma becomes attached to that person. So I just wanna let you know, like, we gotta do better as people because you may have a child with a disability one day. And would you really want somebody to call your child handicapped or say or crippled or retarded or John Doe or ain't quite or you know any other derogatory term that you could think of? Would you want your child to be subject to those names? Would you want your sister to be subject to that name? Would you want your mama to be subject to that name? Because what people fail to realize is just because you don't have a disability today don't mean, God forbid, but don't mean you could walk outside, you could walk outside your front door and have a disability tomorrow. It's people that woke up, it's people that went to sleep with nothing wrong with them and woke up with a disability. So you gotta be cautious of the terms that you use when you're referring to people with disability because simple fact, it could be you, or it could be your next of kin, or it could be your kids. And a lot of people don't think about that. They feel like, oh, and a lot of people don't think about it because they feel like it's hereditary. And they feel like because it it don't run in their blood, it's not gonna happen. But I'm here to shed some light. Cerebral palsy is not hereditary. Nobody in my family has cerebral palsy except for me. So just because it ain't you, don't mean it ain't gonna be somebody else down in the line of your family. So be real mindful of how you address somebody with a disability, or how people with disability address themselves, because it's still the same. It's all the same because if you address yourself as a person with a disability as a derogatory term, how you expect somebody else not to? And I'm gonna be honest, it feels different when somebody else refers to you as something like that. It feels different, let alone you addressing yourself, but it just feels different. Now, something else that we could do to stop people with disability from addressing themselves as such terms is building up their self-esteem. Like I didn't really become prideful into my disability until I started lifting weights, until I started, trying to become a athlete with a disability. Um, if you build up your self-esteem, I think the terminology change or fall in place. Um, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but the guy who was talking to my friend, this man did everything. This man did everything by himself. He drove. He drives. He take care of himself. It was just that was the only thing he knew. And again, that's why I say it's a little bit of both. It's passed down and it's generational. But it only takes one person to break the cycle. It only takes one person to break the chain. And again, that's why I'm so appreciative of the friends and family that I have, because even though I'm not around them, my message still is in the room because it resides within them. So even when they go out and they meet a person with a disability, they're able to come to them and be like, "Hey, that's not the right way to address it." So I can't thank them enough for doing that, because it again it's hard enough as it is without being labeled as an insult. Um, I just really, again, I really hope that my message and my podcast reaches somebody, especially this. I hope all of them reach somebody, but especially this one, because this one is very common. And it's a lot more common than you think, especially among the older generation, because they didn't have much, they didn't have the knowledge. The knowledge wasn't even thought of yet. Like, I forget the name of the video, but it was a video where they used to have people with disabilities cut off from society because they deemed them unfit for society. They was in like the town would be like, this will be the town, and this and well, okay, like, this will be the town. This will be the town, and this will be the part of the town. The other side of my hand will be the part of the town that doesn't have the disability, and on the inside of my hand would be the time all the people with all the people with disabilities. And it, it again, that just created the stigma, that just created more strife and more stigmatism, more negative connotation, which probably helped create some of the words. So but I think in 2020, in 2022, going in 2023, I think it's time for a change. I think I think we need to be more mindful of how we address this demographic and how we address ourselves. Because if we don't have pride in ourselves as people with disability, how we expect anybody else to? And if we don't do the research ourselves, then how we expect for people to know that they've been going about it wrong. It's just something that I feel like needs to be addressed. I feel like it needs to be a conversation, and I feel like it needs to be rectified, because again, I'm not begging for nothing. um I don't sit on the corners and beg for money. I don't do that in my wheelchair. I don't do that. I refuse. So when it comes to somebody else calling me that, I'm not gonna take it. When it comes to somebody else calling themselves that, I'm not gonna take it because, as I said in my last podcast, you're more than just your disability. You are your ability, and you having a disability just so happen to be part of it. But I just can't stress it enough. Like, something has to give when it comes to, us as people using these terms, and especially in this day and age, because people with disability have done so much stuff, and not just recently. They've done so much stuff throughout history. They've done so much stuff. Like, people really should do their research. Like, and I know a lot of people only wanna acknowledge people like Michael, Oscar Pistorius, but you got Beethoven, you got people with disability, who invented stuff, who had autism, who I ain't gonna say who had autism, a person who has autism, but we've done so much for society, and for us to not have pride in ourselves is heartbreaking, because we get overlooked, but we pioneered stuff too. Like, especially when it comes to breakthroughs in the medical field. Um, like, there's wheelchairs that walk upstairs. It had to be a person with a disability for them to think. It had to be a person with a disability for them to think about something like that. Like, it's 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 so much that it's so much pride to be had in being a person with a disability. And that's why I feel like the derogatory rhetoric has to be changed, because we are a phenomenal group of people. We really are. And you just gotta take time to get to know. You just gotta take time to find out. But we are some of the most unique people that people are ever gonna meet. And I just wanted to drop that little nugget in my podcast, because I don't think people with disability get the recognition that we deserve, even from our own selves. We be so busy thinking about the negative connotation that the disability, that we forget to look at the positive. Like me, I'm a prime example of that. But, like, I know that my legs are not as strong as that I would like them to be, but my upper body, I'm strong as an ox. So it it just gotta take time to flip that disability upside down, flip it on its head, and or take the this out of disability. And that's and a lot of time that starts with the terminology. And I just want to say, thank y'all for y'all attention, and thank y'all for listening to me, and thank y'all for being in attendance. And I appreciate y'all giving me this platform to be able to express my opinions and my views about being a person with a disability, and things that I see on a day-to-day basis that I feel like need to be changed. Because I know that if I feel like this, I'm not the only one. I have a friend now who has who has CP, and he he loved my podcast because it gives it sheds some light, and that a lot of people don't think about. A lot of people don't think about that first person perspective. It's always vicariously through somebody else. It's always somebody else. Well, most of the time, it's somebody else who doesn't have a disability speaking on a person who has a disability or speaking for a person who has a disability. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that. That's fine. But it hits different when you have somebody who's walking in it. So I just want to say thank y'all, and this has been another episode of Alabama Care, and I hope to see y'all again soon.